Okay, hello everybody. Sorry I'm not there today. They have me doing a special training here at school, so that's where I'm at. We're going to go over congruent figures today. Okay, so first thing we're going to start off with some definitions, and this is a pink half sheet that you guys have. Okay, so the key concept here, congruent polygons have congruent corresponding sides and angles. So that means that all of their sides that match are equal and all of their angles that match are equal. That's what corresponding means, is matching. And when you name them, you have to list the corresponding vertices in the same order. So you can see here, side AB matches side EF. So AB is congruent to EF, and then CD is congruent to GH, those are corresponding, and BC is congruent to FG, and AD is congruent to EH. So that's what these are saying here. And then you can also see the angles are congruent. So angle A is congruent to angle E, D is to H, B is to F, and C is to G. And so since all of your sides are congruent to each other and all of the angles are congruent, you have two congruent polygons. And so they name this polygon A, B, C, D. And notice I'm drawing this arrow that goes in order here. Is congruent to, well, we have to start at E, F, G, H. So we follow the same order on them. And that's how you name congruent figures. Another thing for congruent polygons, and this is for triangles specifically, it says if it's called the third angles theorem, if two angles of one triangle are congruent to two angles of another triangle, then the third angles are congruent. So basically, if you know two of the angles are the same on each of them, that remaining one has to be the same on them both as well. So if angle A is congruent to angle D, and angle B is congruent to angle E, well then you know that angle C is congruent to angle F. Because think about it, let's say that angle A is equal to angle D, and they're both 60, right? And then angle B would be equal to angle E, and let's say that they are both 30. Well, in a triangle, the three angles add up to 180, so 180 minus 60 minus 30, well, that's 90. There's no other number that it could be, so that means that both C and F would have to be 90. Okay, and then the last part here is the definition of congruent triangles is triangles with three congruent corresponding sides and angles. So it's a congruent figure. It's just special because it's a triangle. And you could say there could be the definition of congruent rectangles, the definition of congruent kites, etc., right? It's just as long as your polygons have the congruent corresponding sides and the congruent corresponding angles, then they are congruent. So that's vocab. Now let's go to our examples. Okay. So the first one here, it says naming congruent sides and angles. So if HIJK is congruent to LM and O, what are the congruent corresponding parts? Okay, what I like to do is I like to write the names of them vertically. So HIJK, and then that's congruent to LM and O. Okay, so those are all congruent there. So angle H is congruent to angle L. Okay, angle I is congruent to angle M. Angle J is congruent to angle N. And angle K is congruent to angle O. So those are the angles that are congruent. But then you also have the different sides. So we'll start here. So, and again, we'll just go in order, right? So HI HI would be congruent to what? LM. You see they match. So LM. And then our next one here would be IJ would be congruent to what? MN. And then our next one would be JK would be congruent to what? NO. And then your last one, you start at the bottom and you go up to the top. So side KH would be congruent to OL. So there you go. So there's your congruent sides, congruent angles. And all you had to do, I got all that just by matching the letters. Okay, finding congruent triangles. Are the triangles congruent? Okay, if they're going to be congruent, they have to have 3 congruent corresponding sides and 3 congruent corresponding angles. So you have to match here. First thing we have to note, we've got a pair of vertical angles here, so these are going to be congruent to each other. And I'm putting 3 arcs there. So let's kind of draw our triangles separately. We have this one. It's got 1, 2, 3. I'm just turning this like straight up and down. That's 2, and this is the 1. And it's got this one here. Okay, and this side is the 4, and this side right here is the 6. And this corner is C. The one on here is B, and that's A. Okay, and then we'll go do the other one. It's got 3 marks, and the 2 marks, and the 1. And between the 2 marks and the 1, we have a single dash there. And 3 marks to 2 marks, that's 4. And I'm talking about the marks for the angles, so I know how I'm doing the sides correctly. And again, up top, that's C. And then down here is D, and then E. Okay, so are they congruent? Well, match them up. CB matches CD. Okay, those are congruent. CA matches CE. Those are congruent. BA and DE, well, we see the tick mark, so we know those are congruent. So our sides are good. And then now, look at your angles. 3 and 3, 2 and 2, 1 and 1. So do they all match? Yes. So yes, they are congruent because they have congruent corresponding sides and angles. So yes, they are congruent because they have congruent corresponding sides and angles. Okay. Next one. It says and this should read triangle, is triangle ABD congruent to triangle CBD? Okay, so ABD. ABD. And is it congruent to CBD? So here's CBD. Now I'm drawing these arrows so that I know how to follow the markings on here. Okay, so they're going to the center and then up around that way. One important part here, you see this DB in the middle. It is shared by both triangles, so we can mark it congruent, and we're going to put 2 tick marks because it's a second line. Okay, now it says, are they congruent? Justify your answer. Okay, well, all I know here is that I have 2 sides that are congruent. Do I know anything about my angles, if they're the same size or not? Do I know if DB is bisecting this angle D here? No, I have no idea. So the only thing I know about these triangles is that their 2 sides are congruent. So are these 2 things congruent? No, we can't say. Not enough information. Okay, so you can't say that they're congruent because you don't know about those angles. Okay, proving triangles congruent. So now we're going to do a little proof here. Okay, so all of these markings on the picture is from this given stuff. So given that LM is congruent to LO, so LM and LO, you see they have the same markings on them. Okay, then they also say that MN is congruent to ON, so again, they have the same markings, they each have 2 marks. And then angle M is congruent to angle O, and angle MLN, so this one here, is congruent to angle OLN, so this half right there. So from each of our triangles, we know we have 2 congruent angles and 2 congruent sides, okay? And they are corresponding to each other. You can just see you took the top one and flipped it down here. So there's one other thing on this diagram that we haven't shown is congruent. And it's this line that's going in the middle here, line LN. It's shared by both of them, so it's congruent for both of them. So you put 3 lines on it, because that's your third. So now we have 3 lines that are congruent. So, or 3 sides, I should say. 3 sides that are congruent. So there's that part. And then now you gotta look at your angles. Okay, this is where those theorems come in handy. You see how we have 2 angles that are congruent on our triangles, right? Well, if 2 of the angles are congruent on each of the triangles, then that means their third angles over here are also congruent. So these would get 3 lines because they're the third angles and they're both congruent. So now we have 3 congruent sides that match and 3 congruent angles that are matching. So these triangles are congruent and we just have to prove it. So the first one, it says LM is congruent to LO and MN is congruent to ON. Well, that's given. Okay, that's given. Okay, and then the next part, so these are the sides. We're going to start with the sides. So we did the 2 sides that are on the outside. Now we're going to go and we're going to talk about that one in the middle that we did. So LN is congruent to LN itself. And that is the reflexive property of congruence. The reflexive property of congruence. Okay, you're just saying the line in the middle. This is saying it's shared by both of them. So LN is congruent to LN. Okay, now we're talking about the angles. So it says angle M is congruent to angle O, and angle MLN is congruent to angle OLN. Well, where did we get that from? It's given to us. Okay, given. And then now we have to prove that our third angle is in fact congruent for both of them. So since we know that we have 2 congruent angles on each of the triangles, we knew that the third angles were also congruent because of the third angles theorem. So the third angles theorem would be the reason why we could say that M and L, this top one, is congruent to O and L. Okay, and then now we have 3 congruent corresponding sides and 3 congruent corresponding angles. So we know that our 2 triangles are congruent by the definition of congruent triangles. And there you go. That's your proof. So now all you guys are going to have to do is go through and do the assignment. And if you have any questions, you need to pause this, rewind it, please do so. It's also going to be on Canvas. So please don't be afraid to watch it again to help you with that homework. And if you have maybe a couple of questions, I'll help answer them tomorrow. But again, you can't just say, oh, I didn't understand anything. If you're not sure, watch the video again, look on YouTube, search congruent figures or how to prove figures congruent, and you'll find plenty of stuff to help you. All right, so good luck. I'll be back tomorrow. Again, just make sure you finish the assignment because we're going to turn it in. See you guys later.